Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Welcome back to Tuesday Takes. I'm Kevin Knight. He's Tre'Shon Diaz. We are here to bring you no longer bye week takes. It's week 13. We're back to Falcons football being on the calendar. I hope you all enjoyed your vacation. Tre'Shon, how was your weekend without the possibility of being tortured by the Falcons?
Yeah, it was relaxing. Got some yard work done, put the Christmas lights up a little early, got some things taken care of because like you said, the bye week is now over. And the real grind is about to start for this team.
Yeah, the critical games here for this Atlanta Falcons team. For the record, they made this happen to themselves. They could have gone into the bye week at least with 7 wins by winning that Saints game that we all know they should have won. Instead, they lose that, and then they proceed to go to Denver and just get the crap knocked out of them in Denver. So that leaves everyone, obviously, with a terrible taste in their mouth for 2 whole weeks. But those 2 weeks have passed, and now the opportunity is there for this team to get back on the horse and try to secure their NFC South crown over the next few weeks, which I think, full disclosure, like if they can find a way to beat this Chargers team, not going to be easy, and a way to beat this Vikings team, we're probably feeling completely different about what's going on if they can come out strong these next 2 weeks. But the way things ended, obviously, against the Broncos, I think leaves us pretty pessimistic about their ability to do that. But, at this stage, we've had to sit on this game. Now we're going up against these Chargers, which, we haven't seen Monday Night Football yet. We don't know how that went, but how are you feeling heading into week 13?
I like cautionally nervous, I guess. Like, I don't know. People like to say cautionally optimistic. I'm not necessarily optimistic. I'm not thinking that it's an automatic loss walking in, but this game, and I think a lot of the ones after it, were viewed in a very certain light at the beginning of this season, and that light has dimmed a bit. These teams are not looking like the easy gets that they were once advertised to be. And I think the Chargers specifically just match up against Atlanta very well, on their end, not so well on our end. So I'm definitely definitely a little nervous going into this one.
Yeah, no kidding. The Chargers boast, I think, going into Monday Night Football, the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL. The Falcons have obviously not fared well against good defenses this year, considering that they basically need their offense to win the game for them. But there will be some things in Atlanta's favor, which you could check out the game preview show later this week to get all those stats. But basically, the main takeaways are rest advantage and preparation time advantage. They do matter in the NFL. The Falcons have a gigantic advantage in that regard, as the Chargers will have a short week going into this game, where the Falcons will have 2 weeks off to prepare and rest, hopefully get a lot of these key players that were injured back, and give Atlanta, the upper hand from sort of the off-field angle. We'll hope that that's enough, because obviously this win would be big for them. But the grander topic of this show, is today's episode of Tuesday Takes, is more, how will the Falcons finish this season? Because that's the big question. We've seen this team under Arthur Smith get to this point and fail every time. They just fall apart down the stretch. And the first cracks of that potential, that happening have shown, obviously, over the last 2 weeks. So is this team any different? Is this coaching staff any different? That's what we're going to talk about today. We'll get into that, as well as, the very few, breadcrumbs you could take away in terms of interesting information from the Monday press conference. But before we do, of course, need to bring you guys a word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number 1 source for online betting. They've got the earliest odds all the way up to in-game live betting options if you want to get in there and make some bets as the game's going on. BetOnline provides you with all the action, the ability to bet on those games while they're happening. I think at this point, hopefully we've convinced you not to bet on the Atlanta Falcons, because this team will always disappoint you. And if you put money on them, it's going to get even worse. So don't tie the Falcons to your mental and financial health. That's a very dangerous combination. But if you do want to do that, BetOnline's got the largest selection of odds on everything from NFL, college football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, MMA. If you could think of it, they've probably got some kind of odds on it. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website, betonline.ag, today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Tre'Shon. So at this stage, Falcons are 6-5. The Bucks, of course, beat the New York Giants, which that team is basically actively tanking, it seems like. So, that team's a train wreck. So that we didn't really learn much about the Bucks from that game, other than that they can take care of business, which I think we were expecting them to do. But rest of season outlook, the Falcons, I think realistically, if the Falcons can get to 10 wins, they probably have this division locked up, because that would mean the Bucks would have to win out to beat that. The Bucks cannot tie the Falcons. They have to get a game ahead of the Falcons or they're out. So 10 wins means the Bucks have to win out. And that's still 6 more games at this point, which even for great teams, winning out 6 games, even against an easy schedule, is not something that's very likely to happen. Things slip up, right? I mean, look at the Titans taking down the Texans this week. I mean, that's just one example. Stuff happens, especially division games, and the Bucks still have several more of those to go. So, the Falcons realistically, 10 wins probably gets them in, but even if they get 9, the Bucks can only afford 1 loss to beat that number. So from that angle, things seem to be okay for this Falcons team. I think they're still 70% or better to make the playoffs as the NFC South winner. But given what we saw the last 2 weeks, I think a lot of people are sounding alarm bells about, well, can they even get 3 wins to get to 9-8? Maybe that probably would be enough, but can they even do that now? So just kind of basic, long-term outlook here. What do you think the possibilities are for this team? How are you feeling about their prospects as we enter this critical 6-game finish for the Falcons?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they don't have to play Tampa again for the rest of this year. That's pretty much what I was thinking when I was watching that Giants game. And I was like, oh, yeah, Tampa looks a little healthier, looking a little better now. Glad we took care of those games. And the other positive is that there's only one division game left this year. So, when you talk about some of those games that you cannot lose, you look at these division games, and the Falcons' last game of the year is against the Panthers. So they realistically just need to go 3-3. They can get away with going 3-3 and still get into the playoffs. One of those 3 wins needs to be against the Panthers. And then in that scenario, like you said, you can't have Tampa Bay run the table. I'm not, proclaiming right now that it's impossible for Tampa to do that. There's a chance that they could. Anything could happen at this point. But, 3-3 is probably, what you're going to be able to get away with. 4-2, I think, is still very achievable. I think getting to 10 wins isn't some crazy ask at this point. You've got the Chargers, the Vikings, the Raiders, the Giants, the Commanders, and the Panthers. And so there's it's kind of a mixed bag when you look at opponents, but I wouldn't say there's a single elite opponent left outside of maybe this Chargers very good defense. But I still wouldn't categorize the Chargers overall as an elite team. They almost gave their last game away. There's still some chargering going on, just like there is some falconing going on, in the first year of these, Harbaugh versus Morris era. So I'm still feeling my original prediction of 10-7 wild card is still definitely in play. But if it ends up being 9-8, hey, if 9-8 can still get the job done. It's really just going to be what do they look like through these 6 games is kind of because I'm okay, you have the Giants, you assume that's going to be kind of a good game. Panthers are putting up a good fight. There's overcoming a lot of talent deficiencies, I think, in some of these games recently. I don't know how long they can keep that up with. Got the Commanders game, which is going to be some nasty affair. You got Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury colliding with the force of the Falcons. Who knows what's going to happen in that one? But again, you're talking about some opponents that if you if you don't try to put too much stock into the last 2 games and you look at the complete 11, you're like, okay, we have a chance against these teams. So outlook is still relatively positive in terms of making the playoffs. Will we see a significantly different looking team compared to what we've seen over these first 11? Probably not. I think we're going to keep seeing some volatile like performances. I think we're going to see some games where they look really good and some games where you're like, what's going on? But we're 11 games in. That's just kind of who they are at this point.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I think we're unlikely to see this team get significantly better. I think we just know at this point that that's sort of we know what this team is. This is a team with a very high ceiling offense, but an inconsistent one, and a defense that has the lowest floor of any. I mean, they're up there with any team in the NFL with how bad this can be defensively. But most of the time, they haven't played that bad. Really, just the Broncos game, they've looked like they're just the worst defense in the NFL. So more than likely, they're going to return to being a below average defense, possibly bottom 5 defense, but they also have the ceiling of this great offense. And I think, some things coming together for them, like getting Drew Dalman back out there and getting this run game going as much more of a significant part of the offense, will help them be more consistent and be able to just outduel teams, because that's their ticket to winning football games, is just outscoring everybody, because you can't depend on this defense to make stops. And we'll see if they can do it. But like you said, you look at their opponents, the Falcons are going to be favored in at least 3 games, you would think. And that doesn't mean they win, but it's like the betting markets, I would say, would have the Falcons favored to go 3-3 at this point as the most likely outcome. Now, by the time we get to that Commanders game, the Falcons could very well be favored in that game. I mean, that team is clearly on a downslope. I mean, they just lost to the only team the Falcons have beaten by 2 scores, right? And the Cowboys. So, that team is very not good, but the Falcons also have a hard time beating that Commanders team. I mean, they seem to always lose the Commanders game for inexplicable reasons. Taylor Heineke magic in one case, but at this point, the Falcons, if they go 3-3, they have a very good chance of winning the division. If they go 4-2, they almost certainly win the division. So, if they can steal a game, whether that's the Chargers, Vikings, or Commanders, they're going to be, probably you'll see that playoff number go up into the 80s to 90s range, because it's really just like if you can steal a game and get to 10 wins, the only path for the Bucs is to win out. And it's just not likely to happen given that defense. It's just that defense is as bad as the Falcons. So even when they're healthy, they still have a lot of issues. So, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, you have to feel good at this stage about at least you've got 3 relatively easy opponents left on your schedule. And the opportunity is always there to win one of these tougher games too. Conversely, the opportunity is always there to blow one of these easy games. So really just stealing a win over the next 2 weeks would probably set you up to be pretty much set, assuming you don't collapse. And obviously, if they were to beat this Chargers team, you'd probably feel a lot better about their prospects going forward, considering this is a tough opponent. I mean, the number 1 scoring defense. They've been really good against the pass. They have been vulnerable against the run. And, we'll have to look at their injury report after this Monday Night Football game. They're going up against the Ravens. It's a tough physical game coming up for them. They were already down some linebackers and corners, so it's like, they could be a little bit more beat up leaving that game, and that could obviously open the door for Atlanta to have more success. But it does feel like rest of season the prognosis is good, and how they fare against the Chargers could really determine how we view them going forward, more than just record wise. But if they can give this Chargers team a game and steal a win here, then I think people will feel a lot more comfortable about their season-long prospects.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for, and you started off with it, is if this team is going to, I think, show signs of improvement or kind of change their ways a little bit, it's going to be on the offensive side of the ball. And I think it starts with getting Drew Dalman back, and then we'll need to see if they can cut back on all these penalties. You mentioned that like their best option right now is to just kind of come out and outduel other teams on the offensive side of the ball. And like after listening to like Raheem Morris's first press conference back, seems to be what he thinks as well, because he didn't talk about defense. He talked about offense. He talked about drive killing penalties. He talked about, being able to be better on that side of the ball and kind of finish drives and things like that. So that's where his mindset is. So I think like, that's where ours should be too at this point. And I think that like the Chargers game is definitely going to set the tone for, the rest of, the rest of the season. And it's, whether that's right or wrong, it's just kind of the way it works. It's like you said, you're coming off of the bye week. The team you're playing is going to be coming off a short week. So it's kind of one of those advantageous situations where, even the schedulers kind of helped you out a little bit with this bye, where you get like an even extra day over your opponent. So I think if they come out, we don't really see any sort of adjustments or changes is what's really going to be frustrating more than anything, because the Chargers are going to run the ball. They're going to have heavy packages. And so Lake is going to be forced to get out of nickel. And if the Falcons try to, play run defense against this Chargers offense the way they have all year with light boxes and, extra DBs on the field, then yeah, I think it's going to leave a pretty bad taste in the fans' mouths, like when you start staring down the rest of this schedule. And it's also just going to start those very uncomfortable conversations that you don't want to have when you're getting close to the end of the season around who should be here next year and who shouldn't, and deter or distract from the conversations of like, hey, we can still win, we can still get into the playoffs here. But it's definitely going to be the tone setter, like you said.
Yeah, and speaking of those heavy packages, former Falcon Tucker Fisk on the other side of the line there. Inexplicable why the Falcons didn't just keep him around, but we got to shuffle. We got to shuffle guys in and out. But yeah, that's one of the big things to monitor. Defensively, like, do we see adjustments for this team? Can we see this team do any? Are they willing to make any significant changes? And Raheem certainly didn't talk about it, and that could be for strategic reasons. Like if they're gonna roll out some new packages and try some different things, probably don't want to talk too much about it to tip off the Chargers. I get that, but you wonder if this will be, maybe we'll see more 4-3, more nose tackle, more 3 linebacker if they do go with 4 down linemen. Obviously the health of guys is going to matter a lot in terms of like if Troy Anderson's healthy and JD Bertrand's healthy, then you can afford to put more linebackers out there. You've got better depth. Obviously, you would like to have your corners healthy as well. Mike Hughes back out there will be big for run defense. D. Alford, if they do have to go to 3 to nickel at any point, which I'm sure they still will play nickel. Don't I'm not questioning that, but that's the big question, because I think offensively it's kind of simple to be like, well, I think they just probably run the ball more, get the run game going, try to incorporate more inside runs, get Drew Dahlman back in the lineup. Hopefully Charlie Warner's healthy, and then let's ride. Defensively, it's much more complicated because teams, Denver gave teams a blueprint. It's like, yeah, you just run these simple route concepts, and the Falcons will leave guys completely uncovered because they run the same coverage, or they're just willing to concede that short area of the field, and it's easy money on screens and these short passes. And they don't tackle well, so you hit that screen pass, it's gonna go for 8 to 10 every time. The Falcons obviously can't do that anymore. So, I'm curious if you think we will see a significant change either in the personnel deployed or the type of coverages that we're seeing from this defense.
Yeah, you said it best. I think Denver did a really good job at kind of exposing how bad the Falcons defense is in space. It feels like before that game, you saw a lot of teams really kind of like working, the intermediate, but they weren't necessarily drawing up plays to kind of create lanes and get blockers out in that space. And you saw Denver scored 3 of their 4 touchdowns off of screen concepts, doing stuff like that. So there's definitely going to be an uptick in plays like that. And when you look at like Harbaugh, like screen game is kind of like was a big part of his 49ers offense. It's a huge part of what Greg Roman likes to do. And so I think that's we're gonna continue to see teams try to figure out different ways to get their own guys the ball in space against this defense. And if that is, that is likely to be the trend, I think you said it, like one area you have to look at is the linebackers. They need more speed in coverage. They need guys who can just actually get to their depths and who can actually get to the football after the pass is thrown, because right now we don't have a lot of closers. Like our corners are good click and close guys, but when you look elsewhere, you're really missing, that ability on defense, and you need it at the linebacker position. And, if Troy's good to go, and like hopefully he's actually good to go this time around, like that's the first person you think of. But I'm just going to go ahead and say it. At this point, even if JD Bertrand is healthy, they need to bench Landman for him. Nate Landman is just not giving you good enough play to really justify his snap count at this point. He's been bad in coverage from just like the basics, and initially when he came back, it was definitely like, okay, you could tell he's still struggling a little bit with the injury, but it's been healthy the last couple of weeks, and you're still seeing the mental errors. You're still seeing him be a liability in coverage. So that's one personnel change I would really like to see them see. And the other one is that it's time to start Zach Harrison. It is time to cut him loose, give him the snaps. He's on pace to finish with 242. He finished with 343 his rookie year. It's been 11 games, and through 11 games, he's ranked as PFF's #1 run defending interior lineman on the team. He's the best defensive tackle when it comes to playing the run, which is the biggest issue. And something that started to really show up on tape recently is that he is playing extremely well from 1 tech to 3 tech. So you're able to relieve Grady and Onyemata with him on the field. And like they need to just kind of bench Do, in my opinion, and just start bringing Do in off second string off the bench. And I think that's really, like, when I look at what personnel decision can they make right now that's not really, that's going to help everybody else, I think that's the one that will help the most on run defense. I'm not necessarily sure, how much of an impact we would get from Bertrand over Landman against the run game. I think it'd be a little bit better, but I think like it starts on that defensive line. And Zach Harrison's somebody where I think that's who has shown he needs more snaps. He's earned more snaps. Do I think they're going to do it? Nothing at this point has led me to believe that they will. Unfortunately, like I can't, like they've come out before and talked about self-scouting. They did that after the Thursday night game. We didn't really see much change. We haven't seen much change with his snap counts all year. So like, to be honest with you, no, I'm not counting on any personnel changes. And in terms of coverage, same thing, honestly. Like, our corners and safeties are in man, like I think on average, like just the corners and safeties, like almost 17% of the time. Yeah. Our main core of D, Hughes, AJ, and Clark, they're all in the bottom 15 in terms of man coverage rate. So like, it just kind of seems like any sort of change and shift to running more man would feel significant at this point, but I don't necessarily think Lake has confidence running that for whatever reason. And then so what I would ask Lake to do is mix up press and off coverage from zone, because you still don't, just because you're playing zone doesn't mean you have to have your guys 8-10 yards back every single time. And the Falcons are like showing off coverage like predominantly, throughout the course of the season. That's what they like to do. And you saw Denver, they went after it, and other teams are all going to see that. And they're like, yeah, if you play off coverage 85% of the time, you don't have anybody inside who's getting out there fast enough to help your corners. So we're just going to eat you up consistently. And like, that's my biggest worry right now, is that everything is going to stay the same on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no, they can't. Like if they do that, we should lose faith in this coaching staff because they can't. You can't keep rolling out the same thing. There's too much tape on it. It wasn't working to begin with. Now there's too much tape on it. The Broncos basically gave every team that wants to a blueprint about what to do to take advantage of this defense. So you have to make some kind of changes, but you have to think, if Trey Anderson is healthy, that's a big if. Then he needs to play as much as possible. But the Falcons were showing that they were, even when he did get back on the field, that he was clearly the third linebacker in the rotation. This team seems to have an enormous amount of trust in Nate Landman, which, like, based on his last year's tape, like if you were starting the season that way, I would be like, okay, like maybe he's earned that. This year it's not the same. Like he can't really move very well, and he's not adjusted to the new scheme particularly well either. So it's just not, you just need more juice out there. You got to get Anderson out there, or Bertrand if that's the case, that Anderson's not ready to go. They've seemed to be very unwilling to do that so far. So that's a problem. And then with Harrison, I just hope he's not seriously hurt. I mean, he comes out of the game after having one of his best games of the season. Is he going to be able to keep going? Like, is he healthy? Are they going to use him? They've really not committed to giving him more than 15 to 20 snaps a game, even when he's been healthy. So, that's concerning. Will they make that adjustment? I don't know. They should theoretically have the guys inside to play well. They're just not playing as well as they could. And I think their reluctance to kind of put these guys in favorable situations, particularly Grady Jarrett, who they've just kind of forced into trying to play this role. Like we talked about it last week. Like, this is not Grady Jarrett's game. Like, this is not what he does. So making him play 50 snaps doing this and getting blown off the ball, you're not helping anyone. You're not helping Grady. You're not helping the defense. Like, if you need guys to play this particular style up front, you just need to save Grady for pass rushing then. Like, if you're going to do that, if you're not going to let him penetrate and try to get in the backfield, like that's how he makes plays against the run. If you're trying to have him take on a double team, it's not going to produce great results. Especially if you're asking him to try to split multiple gaps and things like that. It's just not going to be good, but we did see Khalid Kareem come on and play well last week too. So maybe he gets out there more.
Nice.
If you can unearth someone like that and have them maybe become a starter for you, that would be fantastic. But this Falcons team has been reluctant. Like, they gave Damone Harris a ton of snaps, and he's still on the practice squad, and he hasn't played the last 2 weeks. So not that he played amazing football or anything, but he was looking more interesting than some of the guys they have out there for sure. So the way they've yeah.
I think he's graded as like the second. Kareem and him are the two highest graded edge defenders against the run on the team right now. Yeah. And that is with a limited snap count. But like, again, it's like you're saying, it's like you're getting something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they just gave a full snap count to Lorenzo Carter as soon as he came back, and he was once again the worst defensive player on the team.
It's over.
It's just man. Like, I don't know what's going on with him, but what a fall from. I mean, last year he was giving them like respectable snaps. Like, so yeah. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if it's the scheme change or what, but they just aren't like it seems like everyone's worse this year. And to me, I mean, we talked about it. Like it has to be coaching. It's not everyone's having a down year at the same time. That's almost statistically impossible. So when you see that, there's usually only one place to point the finger, and it's coaching and scheme.
Yeah, and there is another coach I would like to shed some light on, because we've talked about Jimmy Lake quite a bit, and this was like a coaching hire that had, like, when I saw it in the offseason, I was like, oh, okay, I guess. And I hadn't really thought about it much until somebody else brought up something about, our defensive lineman. And then I'm like, oh yeah, Jay Rogers is our defensive line coach. I'm not sure how familiar people are with Jay Rogers' game. Jay Rogers was the defensive line and outside linebacker coach for Brandon Staley's Chargers. If you know anything about Brandon Staley's Chargers, especially their run defense, so it was one of the worst in the entire league every year he was there. Jay Rogers was responsible for coordinating that run defense. suddenly, now that Jay Rogers is no longer employed, the Chargers D line looks pretty dang good, and they've got a lot of like, who is that on their defensive line putting in work? Like, it's not just Mack and Bosa, which again did have some of their worst years under Jay Rogers. You kind of have to start looking around and wondering, are there too many cooks in the kitchen? The Falcons don't have a defensive run coordinator listed on staff, so I'm not sure who's helping Lake when we look at those things, but I know who the right-hand man of Staley was, which, essentially at that point, you're basically like a co-DC, and it was Jay. So I'm definitely worried about the coaching staff a little bit more, I think, as we've gone into the season, especially when we look at areas where we know we retained mostly the same guys, but we're seeing things from players we've never seen before and like just very low quality play, and guys look lost. And it's hard not to look at a guy who had his former team looking lost in all these very similar situations. And again, the Chargers defense heavily regressed after Brandon Staley got there. Like, so I don't know. It's definitely like you said, I definitely think coaching Lake and beyond on the defensive side of the ball has been a little bit of an issue. We have a very young outside linebackers coach right now, who was essentially just operating as like a pre-draft workout specialist and pass rush specialist for guys like that. He was a coach on Texas for about a year before he got hired over. So I'm thinking like, okay, Raheem, Colin Sark, working an old connection. But again, when I look at the room that is around Raheem and Lake on the defensive side of the ball, it's pretty unimpressive outside of Jerry Gray. Like, it's not a lot of like home run hits, big names, or even just guys where you feel like consistently they've had really solid coaching careers. So, I do get nervous kind of wondering, we just invested heavily in a bunch of young defensive linemen. And I'm just trying to think down the road, okay, is Jay Rogers controlling the snap count? Like, how much, power and how empowered are these coaches? Because that's been a big theme from Raheem so far, is that he lets his coaches coach and he lets them make decisions. He trusts them. And I just don't know if I'm trusting Rogers' evaluation skills at this point, because if he's the reason Zach Harrison isn't getting more than 15 snaps a game, then he's doing a bad eval. Like,
Yeah.
You and I talked about this last show, which was, do we have an internal scouting problem?
Yeah. And I think the signs are there that they do have that issue, and we'll have to see how it plays out, over the remainder of the season. But at this stage, that it's weird to not lean more on your young guys, considering it's just like, at a certain point, it's like, Raheem, why are you here? Like, if you're not going to intercede and fix problems, and you're just going to let all your coaches coach, like, should we just promote Zach Robinson to head coach and you can go do something else? Because, like, I'm wondering what you're doing if you're just letting all your coaching hires do whatever they want. Are you just inspiring the team? I mean, Raheem gives a hell of a speech, I'm sure. And that's nice. That is something, but like, at a certain point, we need to take a good hard look at what's going on. You see all these veterans underperforming, particularly someone like a Lorenzo Carter. And I mean, why are we giving Lorenzo Carter snaps? Like, it's not like he played 2 games and then got put on IR, and it's like, okay, well, maybe he could give us something. No, he was the NFL's worst edge rusher for like 6 games before he went on IR. And then as soon as he comes back, they're like, all right, Lorenzo, let's go. We need you, bud. Like, we've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for your return. And, what do you know? He looks exactly like he did before his injury. And it's like, what do we have to do to see some changes around here? And, if things don't get better, are we going to see coaching changes? Like, or is Raheem going to be like, fall into that trap of, well, it's only been 1 year. We got to give guys time, got to give guys time.
Yeah.
It's very
That's a
concerning.
legitimate fear. And
Yeah.
and especially just because it's like, even if it's not like if you're not moving off of Jay Rodgers, if you're not moving off of other people who's like, it's like, this isn't Jay Rodgers' first bad year. This is Jay Rodgers' like 5th bad year in a row in the league. Like, you can't just discount what he did like at his former job and like not put that into your equation. It's like, this is somebody who's like not been getting the job done as a coach for a little bit now. Like, Jimmy Lake is somebody who went like from not calling plays at all to now like calling plays for an NFL team. Like, it almost feels like that was too much of a jump for him too soon. And I do wonder if Morris had started this off as the play caller in year 1 and then turned duties over in play 2, or they started off as code play callers or something, if that would have helped Lake more. And it kind of goes back to your point where it's like, hey, I understand the whole CEO, coach approach and everything like that. But CEO coaches, I think what gets lost in all of that is what makes them a CEO is they can go into any department and talk ball and coach. Like, they're not like somebody where it's like specialized, whatever, Arthur Smith, who's like, when you look at how he operated, it was offense only. I'm not even, looking over there. But he was coaching, and a CEO coach isn't somebody that's just chilling. They're coaching as well too. So I think you have to, kind of wonder if that was just a miscalculation on his part. He's obviously not felt comfortable taking play calling away from Jimmy. I don't think that he's going to at this point. We're 11 weeks in. I think he's
not publicly, at least,
admitted to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely just kind of one of those things where, they talked about internal scouting in the presser and that they looked at things. And so you're right. You hope that after you got to this bye week and everything, that you do see those changes and you do see some action based off of the results. Because like you said, if we aren't seeing anything like that, then, truly, why did we hire Raheem Morris? Because Raheem Morris made it very clear in his presser that this was a team he saw that was in position to win, and that there's just some things that needed to be tweaked, and that they'd be able to get the Falcons back to where they need and where fans want them to be. But we've only seen one tweak, the tweak from 2023 to 2024. We have not seen any tweaks in between. And this is when he needs to really step forward and show why he's given that CEO title and start pulling strings on both sides of the ball to get whatever needs to be done.
Yeah. And I think that's a realistic expectation, is like, I get, like, especially early, like, you don't want to make changes too soon, especially when you're putting in a new scheme and doing all this new install. You don't want to like be like, well, first couple games didn't go great, so we're going to pull the plug on this whole thing. It's hard to have patience in this league when it's so results driven, it's so week to week. But I think having patience, especially early, is good. But there's also the other side of the coin, which is that you can't sit on your hands in the NFL either. You can't wait too long to make a change, and that's probably the big fear, I think, for us is, they get through the season, it's ugly defensively, but they just don't make any changes to the coaching staff after this season, despite those issues. I don't know. I guess they'll just blame the personnel and probably tear it all down at that point, if that's the route they take, which, like, the personnel does need to be changed. I mean, we can agree on that, but there's just no way that this exact same defensive line, for the most part, is all of a sudden bad. Like, after last year being one of the NFL's best, deepest units, they just aren't good anymore. Like, all of them. I just don't believe it. I don't believe you. And the same thing with the edge room. Like, no growth from anyone. I mean, I guess Ebiketie, but I feel like Ebiketie is the same guy. He's just kind of like a decent designated pass rusher. But like, Judon's having his worst year of his career. Carter's having his worst year of his career. The only guy that's playing well is James Smith-Williams. He's on IR. And Khalid Kareem, who has played 32 total snaps. Funny enough, Khalid Kareem has almost already surpassed D'Angelo Malone's snap count. So,
who gets to just live on the 53, just collecting special team snaps, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't know what the plan is defensively, but we need to see some kind of changes, because, like you said, we just know that what we've had so far from a schematic standpoint is not good enough. Denver clearly figured it out. I don't know where we go from here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I think, it's kind of like we said earlier. Even if this team is kind of still stuck in their ways as to who they are, like we've seen that they can still win, around that defense. But like that's when it kind of gets into the conversation of, when we're talking outlook and looking towards the future. It's like if that's the way this team ends up finishing the year, that it definitely leaves you feeling not too good about 2025, because then it's like, well, they went 9-8 and won the wild card. So is it going to be trust the process after that moving forward? Is it going to be like, see, we told you we could make the playoffs, is doing things our way the whole time, and like that's kind of the other thing that starts to get me a little worried. And it's like, like we talk personnel. Well, it's like, you told us you didn't draft, a corner because the personnel was so great. You told us you didn't need to necessarily go edge because defensive tackle is so much more important, and the D line room is loaded. So it's like, even just trying to think of like what's the way to kind of frame this season. They've already put themselves in a position where they've outright said, like, this is a playoff team. And if we don't have a winning season, then it's a failure. And so it's like, well,
okay.
like your
Okay.
words, not mine.
Yeah. Well, so what are we gonna do about it if it doesn't happen, or if it does happen? But it's like, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we don't know how they'll react. It's entirely possible that Raheem Morris knows that he has coaching problems. He would never say anything publicly. Like, he's not that type of guy to begin with, but teams typically don't do that. But it could be that it's like, okay, this is not working. And we're probably going to have to make some changes, but we got to get through this season first. So we're going to have to, put our heads down and try to push through. There's a good chance that is what's happening. Like, I mean, we don't know, but I don't think Raheem Morris is blind or deaf or any of these things where he doesn't know what's going on in his own locker room and his own team. But there's not much you can do about coaching problems in season other than him taking over the defense. And I think it's pretty clear he doesn't want to do that. Even if he, like, behind closed doors takes over more, he probably won't say anything about it, because this is another thing. It's like, it seemed pretty like he was taking this opportunity to try to raise up some guys that were having a rough, like, career path. Like Jimmy Lake, to go from, where he was at Washington, like as an up and coming top college coach, to basically being thrown out because of his sideline actions. Deservedly so. Raheem threw him a huge bone, giving him an opportunity to call plays in the NFL. And, same thing with Jay Rodgers. Like you said, this is a guy that kind of, I think, probably was on the outs in terms of being able to get another defensive line coach job. Probably would have had to,
for real.
Yeah. Probably would have had to take a lower position and work his way back up after, several years of not good results. Raheem throws him a bone, gets him in here. It's like, should we be throwing bones to coaches? Like, is that where we are? Is this just, let's help Raheem's buddies, like, resurrect their careers? And it's like, if they become great coaches, then obviously you look like a genius. But if it's not working out, then it's like, well, is your head in the right place? Are you actually trying to hire the best guys, or are you trying to hire the guys that the guys that you're comfortable with? And obviously this is mostly speculation. I mean, I don't know the reasons behind these hires. Jay Rodgers obviously very experienced. Maybe it's not the experience that you want, but I think this will be one of the questions, is like, did Raheem Morris err in sort of bringing in these guys and trying to, like, rehab their careers when, maybe the important thing to me is just get the best guys. And, I'm so curious, like, eventually when we get more information about what happened with Ryan Nielsen, and initially they were blocking him from interviewing, and then all of a sudden they let him go. It's like, well, why did you do that? Like, did he want to leave? Did you not want him? where you're just going to let him go no matter what. Like, we probably won't hear for a long time, but that's one of the more interesting things when you have the best season defensively you've had in a very long time, and then you don't really prevent the guy who gave you that great season from leaving after initially trying to keep him. It's like, who we're starting to question, like, if this defense doesn't get better and then like we have more defensive problems going forward after a pretty promising year from Nielsen. Obviously it didn't end great, but like, you're going to throw away that season because of 2 games at the end of the year. Maybe they would, I don't know, but just there's some things brewing, I think, in terms of the construction of the staff and the lack of development and the insistence on playing veterans and schematic problems and all this stuff, mostly on the defensive side. I think offensively, we're looking pretty good with these coaches. And I think expecting growing pains from Zach Robinson and all that, pretty obvious. But the difference is that Zach Robinson has been constantly trying to make offensive changes. They haven't all been good changes. Like week 1 is a great example of that. But I think ultimately you look at what, Zach Robinson, the offensive side, like these guys have been trying to iterate. They've been trying to add wrinkles every week. We haven't really seen that defensively, and it seems like that's where we're getting these schematic issues. Like the offense is far from perfect, but I think we look at the construction of the scheme and we're not really saying, well, the scheme is holding this offense back. I think it's more mistakes and sloppiness holding the offense back. On the defensive side, I think we could say that it's not very talented, but like the scheme is doing nothing to help at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of things too, even that have mainly, a lot of people focus on like time of possession, talking about the defense and whatnot. And it's like, look, when that defense is 100% fresh, they play their worst.
Yeah,
they're literally one of the worst. Like they're terrible in the first half. So first of all, when they're running around full of energy, they're awful. So I can't really get sold on this whole they're tired thing, because I'm like, well, when they're tired, they play the best they do the entire game in the second half. The scheme is hurting them as well. When you go back and look at the Dean Pease era, in terms of time of possession, we were down in ranked like 24th, 25th. And it's because a bend don't break defense lets the opposing offense have the football, drive it down the field, and then you hopefully surrender 3, or you're able to keep them from getting that field goal altogether. But by design, that defense plays into your opponent getting to have the football longer than your own offense. So like, yes, we need to clean up some of these 3-and-out scenarios and some of these other quick drives, but you can't say that that's the reason why the defense is on the field for so long or anything like that. It's like the defense is on the field for so long because of Jimmy Lake, because of the coverage calls, because we love to give up. We give up the highest completion percentage among all defenses in the league. And so when you do that, you're going to end up spending more time on the field. It's like it's the biggest flaw of like the bend don't break defense.
Yeah. We talked about it last week. Just like it feels like they're playing kind of the opposite defense they should, given their talent, where it's like the one thing you can trust when your secondary is healthy is like that's a pretty good secondary. We saw them play well for most of last season in man coverage, where they just found ways to kind of limit teams. They got a lot of pass breakups, they got turnovers, and they forced teams to hold the ball longer, which helped out the pass rush a lot. Like just forcing quarterbacks to not have easy throws and to hold the ball even for an extra second is massive in the NFL. And right now, it's basically easy money for these quarterbacks, where they just can get rid of the ball without too much problem, and the pass rush really has no chance at all. The way they're playing now with so much off coverage and so much zone, which has, I think, become extremely predictable for the opposing offense, it's like they don't trust the corners. They're like, we can't have you man up or play press because we think you're going to get toasted every snap. But we think, we could just play off and maybe our pass rush will get home and prevent this from being bad. Or we trust our linebackers to run and tackle. It's like, first of all, you can't trust your linebackers to run and tackle. They're not athletic enough if Troy Anderson's not out there. Second, your pass rush is the worst part of your defense, so you can't trust them to get home. So it's like, if you can't get home with the pass rush and you can't trust your linebackers to run and tackle, your only option to me is to have your corners closer to the line of scrimmage, because you can't afford to give up free catches. You can't afford to give guys a free release or an opportunity to catch a ball behind the line of scrimmage with no contest, because if you let the other team get blockers in space, you can't stop it. You can't get over there. And you know what? Playing so much off coverage hurts your run defense too, because your corners are 8 yards off trying to make tackles on the edge, and your edge rushers aren't good enough to block it up. So you're going to need your corner to come up from that spot. And if they have to run that far, it's just, it feels like the defense has been constructed for a different roster. Like, and the unwillingness to change is obviously really problematic, given that, like, maybe they thought the roster was something else when they got here. It's been 11 weeks. Like, you should know what the roster is by now and make changes. You know, we see the best coordinators do that. And not that we're lifting up these coordinators in that air, but like, even average coordinators should be able to make adjustments to their scheme 11 weeks into the season. But again, maybe it's just a bye week. Maybe like they needed extra time to make more significant changes. Maybe that's our only hope.
Yeah. And I mean, there's, again, like when we look at this schedule, like there's, you know, some like games here where Lake can really kind of, you know, help shift the narrative like in his favor, like towards the end of this season, when you look at offenses like the Raiders and the Giants and like even the Commanders and of course the Panthers at this point. You're going to have a chance to kind of, you know, take advantage or have some more favorable matchups. You know, once you get past this Chargers and, you know, I'll even say Vikings, because KOC is a wizard. Doesn't really matter. I think who's it quarterback back there, he's going to figure out how to exploit you. But beyond him, there's not like an offensive mind that like terrifies me. There's not a offensive unit where like even I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, the Falcons should legitimately like almost be able to double their current sack amount like in these final 6 games. Like those are the kind of opponents they're going to be playing. So you know, just kind of like we've been saying, if we don't see any changes, if we haven't seen any of these kind of adjustments or just anything different at all, it's just not, you know, it's just not up to the standard of like, you know, what this league is.
Yeah, no, I agree. So this is their opportunity to make a change. I think they kind of have to. But again, it's like, I'm just so concerned by the evaluation piece of it. Because like, I mean, not to keep harping this Broncos game, but you know, we saw Kevin King come out as the slot corner in D'Alford's absence. He only played a couple snaps, so we can't really make a fair estimate, but Kevin King has not played well so far. Like, I think we can all agree on that. Like, so I get that he's the guy that's been on the roster, but he's not really shown any indication of being a reliable slot defender or safety at this stage. So he's also almost 30 years old and barely has played in the last 3 seasons. So, you know, there's not, I don't really get the, like, there's not really an angle of like, well, we're trying to get this guy on the field so we can develop him either.
Yeah.
Kevin King gets injured pretty much immediately, like within the first 3 snaps, four snaps of the game. He has to leave. They don't go to the corner they elevated, who has played slot for this team before. They go to Richie Grant, who has 2 good plays to open the game. Like, you know, great for him. And then proceeds to just get absolutely roasted the entire second and third quarters before the team finally puts Natrone Brooks in the game and has a great game. So looks great. He's flying around. He's doing all kinds of stuff, you know, and it's like, so who like decided that Brooks was not better than playing a safety at corner, which was obviously incorrect, that assessment. Like, it's very concerning that, like, I went into this week thinking that Natrone Brooks was going to be the slot corner because we've seen him play slot and he's looked good doing it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not ideal to have a UDFA come in and start at the slot, but we've actually seen him look pretty decent when called upon. So, like, let's give him a chance. And instead, they trot out two guys first that don't play slot corner before they give Natrone Brooks, who does play slot corner, an opportunity to play slot corner. And it's like we don't get to see him until the fourth quarter where he finally starts looking good. And it's just like that is one of the clearest examples of this evaluation issue, which is that we can tell from watching Natrone Brooks play a handful of snaps on game day that this guy's probably your best option as your backup slot corner. But this team who sees him in practice every single day can't figure that out. Or don't believe it or whatever. And to me, that's just a giant red flag that we shouldn't be evaluating players better than the team. That's a big problem because as great as we obviously are, we are not professional NFL coaches. We should not be making correct calls that the team can't make. And if we're doing that with regularity, which I like to be right, but like I would rather the team be right and I be wrong, that's very concerning. I mean, it's downright alarming, to be honest. So hopefully that was just a blip on the radar. But this is not the only time we've seen this sort of evaluation error happen.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit before, and I'm not sure if it's because of how things went in Tampa or not. Where Morris did lean heavily on younger players. And you've even heard Michael Bennett talk about the story of Raheem giving him his shot, and how Raheem came to him and said, hey, we've got these guys in front of you. They aren't getting the job done. We're going to give you your shot this week. Pull you off a practice squad. And Bennett credits Raheem for being the guy to give him a chance and everything like that. And so it just doesn't really seem to line up with like the coach that I feel like Raheem has been throughout his career, which is somebody who's not afraid to take a chance on young guys and gives them more opportunities. And, I don't know if it's the pressure of, needing to make the playoffs, win these games. It's his first year. It's his first job back again. So he wants to try to do things, a little bit differently than he did before. But, I honestly think that's probably the wrong way to go about things, because he got his first job for a reason, and it was for being himself. And, last year when he was with the Rams, you really saw him utilize a bunch of young guys, a bunch of random players that people would have been like Michael Hodgett's now a household name because of Raheem Morris. Like Michael Hodgett got all those snaps, all those opportunities last year because Raheem was just like, hey, man, I don't care. Like whatever you're doing works. And like we have guys like a Khalid Kareem, like a Damone Harris, like a Natrone Brooks on the roster. And you see these performances and you don't really see anything come out of it. And it's frustrating because, like I said, it just doesn't really seem to align with, Raheem, and then just kind of like football and coaching in general, man, it's like, if the guy puts out good film, you play him. It's always been that simple. That's really all it's ever boiled down to, is who's doing the best job out there when their number is called. So, I am hoping, I'm just not, putting too much faith into it, but I am hoping that like he kind of takes a look at this and is like, okay, you know what? We haven't even mentioned his name, but Brandon Dorless, another guy, comes up. Brandon Dorless' like biggest issue was as a run defender. He comes up and he is some great defensive run play.
Yeah,
we got to see something from this. We got to see these guys get more opportunities, more snaps, more play time. It can't just be like going back to business as usual after that and just kind of scrapping it. It just is. It's been frustrating and it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. I totally agree. You saw what the Rams put a ton of trust in Raheem last year in 2023. They lost a lot of veterans. They didn't have any cap space. They barely had draft picks to work with. And they drafted a bunch of guys that Raheem immediately put on the field, trusting tons of these young players to come out there and produce. And it went great. Like I mean, the defense wasn't like amazing or anything, but it was a respectable, like top 20, level defense.
Yeah,
like it was not a liability.
By the end,
yeah, they were not a bad defense. And it's like he came here and did exactly the opposite. It was just like, we're not going to even activate our rookies. Like no rookies were active for 4 weeks. And we're going to lean entirely on veterans. We're going to not give reps to young players. Like it just doesn't match what I thought we knew about Raheem Morris as a coach. And I don't know if this is a CEO thing where he's like, well, Jimmy and Jerry Gray, like the secondary stuff is definitely Jerry Gray. Like Jerry Gray has definitely done this type of thing before. Like last year with Mike Hughes in the slot, like Mike Hughes is one of Gray's guys. He has been his entire career. And I was like, well, I just know
So
Jerry Gray is going to, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's like, Jerry's a great coach. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, he's not the biggest problem or even close to it, but like he does this where he's going to lean on his guys that he knows to a fault. And then eventually he'll give guys an opportunity and then be like, okay, yeah. But like, that's just who he is. He's earned the right to do that, I think, probably more than anyone else.
You've never been wrong about Richie Grant, Jerry. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, his reluctance to play Richie Grant is the only thing saving him. But he needs more reluctance, apparently. But yeah, the other guys, like defensive line, linebacker, edge group, like there's not really any justification for those veterans continuing to play. So we got to find some other path forward, and hopefully they'll start doing that this week. The bye week is an opportunity to make significant changes, whereas most weeks you just simply can't. It's just not enough practice time. So we'll see, but that's the thing. That's what I like about man coverage is like, well, it's not like we have to install 15 new coverage shells. Like we're just going to make this man or this man coverage is pretty straightforward compared to, I don't know if you guys have seen Honest NFL on Twitter, who like shows you some of these like Fangio zone calls, and it's like 17 steps. Like there's like this guy has this and this guy has this, but if the receiver goes over here, then you have to switch to this, and it's like zone coverage is hard for like it's complicated. Man is not that complicated, so it's one of the reasons I like it. Obviously, it has its shortcomings too. No coverage is perfect. It's part of the chess match, but if they want to implement more man coverage, that's something that's not going to be that complicated to pull off. So I think simplifying would actually be really wise for this team, especially if they want to get these young players more involved. And give Justin Simmons a chance to make plays also. That's the other thing we didn't talk about. But, let that man be back somewhere trying to pick the ball off, because playing him closer to the line of scrimmage, like I thought it was an interesting idea. Especially if they were going to give him more like robber looks and stuff like that. They haven't really done that. When they've had him playing just more like box stuff, like just box stuff, not really like coverage box, just like try to make tackles. And like, he's a fine tackler, but that's not his strength. If you want, like, it feels weird to be like, well, Jesse Bates should be your strong safety given how good he is as a deep safety. But at this point, it's like, he kind of needs to be your strong safety, considering that Simmons probably just needs to be sitting back there and trying to make plays. Simmons doesn't have the same range he once did, but he's still fairly rangy safety, so he should be okay. But like, I feel like Jesse Bates he just needs to be close to the action. Like, just let him get up there and do something. But whatever the answer is, I don't know if we know the answer. Maybe it's something we discussed, maybe it's not, but they need to figure out some kind of answer, because we can't watch defense that looks like that Bronco. If they come out looking like that against the Chargers, we're gonna have it's gonna be quite a Tuesday takes next week in that case. So
no, it's not gonna be a good Tuesday.
It's not gonna be a good day. No, it's gonna be a dark day for all of us. But Tre'Shon, let's close on just one final take. How do you think this team finishes this season? Do you think we do see improvements and they finish strong? Do you think they kind of just coast in, maybe get in at 9-8? Like, just kind of overall thoughts on what this team's going to look like over the final 6.
Yeah, I do think that I think we'll see some more growth from Robinson. We've kind of talked about how there is regression within progression, and we have seen the Falcons offense kind of flatline a little bit in recent weeks, but I do think that the addition of Dahlman and then just kind of this time to sit and reevaluate what they've been doing on that side of the ball, I expect that the offense to improve. Um, in terms of defense, they might be forced to play some of the younger guys we've talked about just based on health, like just kind of like from that standpoint from where we are. So, um, I I think that we'll see some small tweaks in personnel. I think it's mostly going to be the same, though. I think we'll probably end up just having to get by with, whatever we want to describe this defensive situation. And they probably do, limp into the playoffs a little bit. But I do think that they're going to get in, and I think that they're going to be able to hit the 3-3 mark, but I still think that 4-2 is definitely like very doable, and alive, and at play here for them. And I think if they can achieve that, then Tampa Bay only being able to have one loss in that scenario is a really tough ask for them. Um, and I think that the Falcons do end up, making the playoffs kind of like how I had originally predicted. I don't know if it'll be 10-7. I'm leaning in a little bit more to 9-8 at this point, but I think 10-7 is still possible, just because, like, again, it's not an easy schedule, but the Falcons have beaten teams that are better than the ones they're going to see in this final six. And
Yeah.
just kind of leaning on that fact tells me, like, and still anything can happen. And the Falcons could even go do something crazy and run the table, go 5-1 themselves. We don't know, but
Anything's possible. I mean, if the last
anything's
week
possible.
has taught you anything, it's that this is a weird ass league and anyone can beat anyone, which is why, like, I don't care, like, the schedules. If you tell me if you go 3-3, you'll make the playoffs, and your opponent needs to go, 5-1 to make the playoffs, regardless, and you don't know the schedule for either one, you just know the records, you should take the 3-3 every time, because it's simple. It's just, in the NFL, even the easy games aren't so easy. I mean, the Chiefs almost lost to the freaking Panthers, right? The Texans lost to the Titans. Okay, like, shit happens. Like, these teams are all, like, even the bad teams are capable of beating good teams in the NFL. This isn't college football where you get like 35-point spreads. I mean, this is like, this league has parity. It's not always like great parity, but anyone can beat anyone in this league legitimately. And the Falcons just need to take care of business, and I hope that they do. Certainly, I still think that they have a good opportunity to do that. It's just they got to do it. They got to take care of that business. They got to go out there, at the very least, beat the teams you should beat. But right now, I think they would be favored to go 9-8. I think that's probably the Vegas line right now, is that 9-8 number. Can they get to that 10th win and really, like, I feel if they get to that 10th win and go 4-2 the rest of the way, we'll feel like people will probably recognize that this isn't a great team, but they're like at least a legitimate playoff team with 10 wins. I think they get in at 9-8. Everyone will consider this team a joke, and like not a legitimate playoff contender, which would be correct, I think. So, but we'll just have to see how they handle it. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to the offense, like it's been all year. Like, if this offense can come out and take big steps, particularly, like, it's just consistency. Like, if they could come out and run the ball consistently, and consistently well, I think they'll be able to beat pretty much any defense. That's really been the thing, is like, they're going to go up against some good pass defenses the rest of the way, but they go up against some bad run defenses, real bad. The Chargers are like 21st, I think, in yards per carry allowed. That's their weakness. So if you could run the ball, you can beat them. The Vikings, I don't remember the stats. I think they're better against the pass than the run. The Giants have the NFL's worst run defense. You probably don't even need to throw the ball if you can get the run game going. The Commanders don't stop the run well at all. Like, if you can run the football, you're going to be in a good spot the rest of the way. And you got Bijan Robinson back there. You should be able to run the damn football. So we need to see this team commit to that as being more of their identity. I think they've kind of hinted at that with this emphasis on the play action that we're hearing, which is like, why weren't you doing that to begin with, considering Kirk is like elite off play action? But whatever. So I think that's the ticket, is like, this offense needs to be a top 10 offense the rest of the way. And if they are, I think you feel good about them going 4-2 or 3-3 at the very least. But if this offense can't get it together with consistency, then I think that's when you become more concerned about whether they can do it or not, because the defense ain't carrying them anywhere, you know. So if that's been the case. If this team doesn't score 20 points, they lose. If they do, they win. That's basically been what it is for this team. So they should be able to score 20. They should be able to average more than 20 a game, and if they do, I think they'll be fine. And if they don't, they'll probably disappoint us. But I think we can all agree that, after the start that they had, missing the playoffs would be a huge red flag. So yeah. And that would just be Arthur Smith all over again. Yeah. It's so familiar. Yeah. This really feels very familiar up to this point. Like, oh, we saw some signs of life. They beat a couple teams. Oh no, they're 6-5 again. Oh, here the wheels are about to fall off, So yeah. Hopefully they don't do that. But if they lose the next 2 weeks, the Bucs could overtake them. So, we'll see. Hopefully we don't have to live in that timeline, though. Anything else you want to add, Trish?
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, no, that's nothing else. Just gotta, sit back and enjoy one more day of peace. Watch the Chargers tonight. Yeah, and get a good look at, or I should say, back in time, watch the Chargers already. But yeah, just gonna have to see what they do. And like you said, we're gonna have to hope that we're in the right timeline, because if not, things could get ugly, and there will be a lot of finger pointing.
Yes, I would rather we just got into the playoffs, and then we can talk about why this team wasn't as good as we thought. And that sort of thing. I'd much rather have that conversation than have another conversation about this team missed the playoffs again. And I swear to God, if they get the 8th overall pick somehow, we're going to contact some kind of, I don't know, we need to contact someone to break the curse of this team, because no team has gotten the 8th overall pick 3 years in a row. So if they somehow manage to get it 4 years in a row, we're definitely trapped in some kind of weird Groundhog Day NFL season situation. So
let's see if they'll take a defender this time.
If we just keep doing the same thing, it can't keep happening the same way, So yeah. Yep. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. We're both still positive about the Falcons finishing the season with a winning record and making the playoffs. We'll see if they can oblige us in our positivity or not. But thanks so much for joining us on Dirty Birds and Brews. Thanks for joining us for Tuesday Takes. As always, like, subscribe. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. If you got a comment, we love to hear it. Leave that for us. If you want to support the show, check out the Patreons, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, or check out the YouTube channel memberships. If you're a video enjoyer, check out thefalcoholic.com for all that great written content. No Wednesday show this week, as I'm taking a little mini Thanksgiving vacay, but we'll be back, of course, for a game preview for you guys on Friday, and then post-game coverage following Falcons versus Chargers on Sunday. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for joining us here on Dirty Birds and Brews. I'm Kevin Knight. He's Tre'Shon Diaz. We'll see you next time. Have a great night, folks.